Hey there, you're listening to the Not So Breakfast Show with Sasha and Ish. Alright, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, and this is the one about how to be more interesting. How do we up our conversation game? Maybe to become the most interesting person in the room, or maybe just to be more engaging. Plus, was this you?
We are hoping that the fish we're eating is poison, so we have to leave really quickly with ultra bad food poisoning, because that's a preferable option than to sit here listening to you.
I hope not. Alright, that's the show. Let's get it. Alright, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, and this is the one about how to be the most interesting person in the room, because I've had a few examples lately where I have struggled really just to engage with anybody in the room. But I tell you what, if we were in a room right now, Sasha, you would be the most interesting person just for the fact that you've got no pants on and a massive t-shirt.
That's not fair. I do have pants on, but I'm not going to pull my nightie up to prove that to you.
I'm loving the Elton John nightie. It's a good one.
Well, I tell you what, Portia came home with it the other day, and she was wearing it, and I went, oh, snap, I want one. We've never been like a mum and daughter that matched. She was never very keen on my ideas that we should wear matching outfits at Christmas. But she agreed. She relented. She conceded, and she went and purchased for me an Elton John t-shirt. Nightie thing.
That's so cool.
Happy Christmas,
cool.
everyone. Happy Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year. All of that jazz, because we're recording this. Well, we're recording on the 5th of January 2022. I've had a few late nights, so I think I woke up this morning. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. We don't usually record in the morning. We usually record in the afternoon. It's like when my alarm went off 7:15, I was like, oh, that's right. That's what it feels like.
I didn't want to say anything because I think how people look is the least interesting thing about them. But you look really tired.
I tell you what, we won't be taking any photos of the screen today. No. So I thought we could do a topic about how to become the most interesting person in the room. And it's really because I've got a bit of a confession.
Have you lost another episode?
No, I haven't lost another episode. I've just lost episode 56. I will start looking for it again. It's a different confession this time, Sash.
Here we go. I'm ready.
Okay. I love being on stage. I love the big talking, but I hate the small talk, and I really struggle one-on-one. And sometimes I feel like I get trapped at a dinner party having to talk to someone.
Yeah, well, imagine how the person with you feels.
I know. So I want to be more interesting in those environments, and I thought that would be a really good topic for us to discuss.
Yes, okay, good. So, excellent. I always start, as you know, with this whole question of why. And so when you say how to be the most interesting person in the room, the logician in me, the logical person in my brain goes, well, that's not possible. Because if the 700 people that are listening to this podcast are all at the same party, they can't all be the most interesting person in the room, right?
Yeah.
And so part of my question is, why do you even want to be the most interesting person in the room? Because it feels competitive. It feels like that it comes from scarcity, that only one person can be the life of the party, and so that's going to be me. But I actually think what sits underneath that, I'm guessing, is we just want to contribute to the conversation. Yeah. And we also don't want to be in situations where we're bored shitless. And you know my thing, that only boring people feel bored. So what do you do when you're in those situations where you're like, this is terrible? And so me, I prefer to come from service, which says, how can I contribute to this conversation, but also how can I contribute to myself and my own sense of fun and having a good time? How do I bring value? Versus what feels like there's a lot of this time of year, like transform your life, be the most interesting person, be the best this, be the da. And I kind of rebel against that. But I don't rebel against the idea that heaps of people are really suck at making small talk, so let's help.
Yeah, and, sometimes you're talking to someone and you just go, I wish they were more interesting. And sometimes you're talking and go, I wish I was more interesting. So it's really, I guess, starting to explore the skill set, because I think you can make someone more interesting by asking great questions and starting to flesh out their stories and their conversations a little bit. And that's a skill set as well as it is being able to tell a great story and all that kind of stuff. Because I've got one great game, right? I can get in there and I can be that version of Ish, and I can do it maybe a couple of times, but if I've gone to the third party, I'm out of tricks.
I got nothing else. I've already told you my 3 best stories.
That's it. You've heard that one, you've heard that one, you heard that one. Now the smoke and mirrors are gone.
There's nothing.
Yeah, but
Zero
maybe,
substance.
Yeah, but maybe how do we make other people feel important? How do we make them contribute to the conversation in a way that's more interesting? Because I think sometimes we just talk and we are waiting literally for our next opportunity to talk. Those are what the gaps are, right? When you're talking, I'm just going, so when do I start talking?
When do I merge?
When do I merge with
my like a zip
epic story that is way better than yours? But maybe there's an opportunity to just start to flesh out information from people.
Well, I think you've sort of, in that little 3 minutes, you've said about 1 million things, which is amazing. And that's one of the things that you're good at. But if we were in conversation, jeepers, which thread would I pick up from that? So one of the things that I think is really important to remember around all of this stuff is that it kind of has to come from a place of authenticity, right? And that if you want to be interested, you've got to be interesting. And if you want to be interesting, you've got to be interested, which is your point about asking questions, right? Asking questions about people. But I remember this horror night that I had once. I was really young, 19 or 20, and we were out at a work function. And I was with my kind of then boyfriend-ish. He was also my boss, and it was, challenging. Mm-hmm. My boyfriend-ish, not you weren't my boyfriend. He was sort of my boyfriend.
I must admit, even I got a bit confused.
Maybe this is the way to be more interesting. It's just to tell stories that make no sense. So everyone has to listen. Anyway, we're out for dinner, and the guy that I was with had just bought a Jeep. And that was back when you had to import Jeeps into New Zealand. You couldn't buy them. The steering wheels were on the wrong side, so you had to transfer the steering wheel over. It was a big deal, right? And it was part of his whole ego thing. And once he realised how much he didn't own the Jeep owned him, he sold it and became a Buddhist. But before that, we were out for dinner. And the guy that we were sitting next to said, he was a Canadian guy, and he goes, "So, Philip," because that was the kind of on again, off again boyfriend's name. He goes, "So, Philip, how'd you get your Jeep converted?" Like, he literally spoke that slowly, and I thought, I'm going to lose the will to live. And so Philip starts telling him, and he goes, "So, how'd you get the steering wheel moved across?" I was like, oh my God, we've already answered this question. There's, "And what about the tires?" And he kind of just went through every single part of the car. And I reckon you've been to a course on how to make yourself more interesting, which is to ask more questions. But it's not. We just, we are hoping that the fish we're eating is poison, so we have to leave really quickly with ultra bad food poisoning, because that's a preferable option than to sit here listening to you. Yeah. So when you come from authenticity, the question is, what are you interested in about someone else? What are those questions that you want to find out? Everybody has fascinating stories. And I would much rather be accused of, and I'm often accused of this, being way too personal, like, oh, that's none of your business, rather than just being so bloody bland and vague and rah. It's yuck, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of your best questions that you like to ask?
Probably picking up on your point before, I like to pick up on the threads.
Yes, please.
Are there. So when someone says something, there are certain little parts of their statement that you can pick up from and delve in. It's a sales technique, right? So if someone says, "Oh, I've just been a bit stressed at work lately," then we've got 3 little threads there, right? We've got work, what do you do? You've got stress, what's going on, how's it affecting you, and lately, like why now, what's changed? So those are threads that can be picked up on. Now you can pick up different orders of those threads. The default would be, what do you do for a job? But at any point in someone's answers, there is ways to just pull a little bit more bits of information out. And I think when you learn to do that, and you possibly learn to do that in a way that is inclusive, so maybe you're in a group of people and you pull out the thread from the most boring person in the room that you were talking to.
Hey, everybody, Sarah is stressed at work. So slaps for Sarah. Sarah's got a job. Well done, Sarah.
Because that's surprising everybody right now. Woo! But it might be that you can then bring other people into that discussion. So you end up facilitating a discussion that makes it more interesting maybe than what's actually going on. So threads.
Threads, absolutely pick up threads. Oh, your haircut. That was a choice. Oh.
What competition did you win for that free haircut? That's good. Because normal conversation, right, if you listen to someone's conversation at a party, it is usually just backwards and forwards. Well, you did this, I did that. And then you did this and I did that. But sometimes that's boring. Sometimes it's good for a starter, but how interesting can you make it? How interesting can you get without being a psychologist?
Yeah, I really like the idea of give and take, which sounds really simple, but in a conversation, that whole thing you were talking about before is, are you listening for a gap so that the thing that you have already prepared to say you're ready to share, or are you just listening and then listening? And then listening. And so one of the challenges for me, this might surprise you to learn, I talk quite a lot. My idea of my sort of funnest thing to do at a party is to go in, tell everybody that's there my story of the week, make them laugh, and then leave and be home in bed by 8:30 reading my book. That's me at a party, right? So I have to be really deliberate about listening. And so when someone's talking and I'm like, oh, I've got a story to add to that, I deliberately say to myself, let it go. Because by the time this person has finished, that story might not be relevant anymore. It might not be meaningful. Yeah. And it means that all you're doing is waiting for them to stop. Yeah. So I say to myself, just wait, listen. And by the time they get to the end of what they're saying, there might be something else to talk about. But the idea of give and take is just to give them the space. And then if you take the space, share something of yourself, but then throw back. So when you get to the end of your story or the end of the thing you're saying, give them an opportunity to respond to that. So you might say, yeah, I got my Elton John T-shirt. My daughter bought it for me and it was at the mall over the weekend. Gosh, it's been so busy in the malls in the Boxing Day sale. I don't know, what have you been doing over the break?
Yeah.
So you say your bit and then you throw back to them. You don't just go, yeah, it's been so busy at the malls.
Yeah, and that's because there's different lengths of response, right? There's a 30-second version of what you want to say. There's a 3-minute version of what you want to say. There's a 30-minute version of what you want to say. And sometimes you get stuck with the person that's doing the 30-minute version of what they wanted to say in a conversation where everyone else was taking 30 seconds, and that's not helpful either.
So if you are stuck with that 30-minute person, what do you do?
Well, I got that the other day. So I've had 2 dinner parties recently. One where I got
such a show
off. Not my natural forte. But anyway, one where I was next to someone that just didn't really know how to engage with the conversation. I just felt like I was pulling teeth out of them, not just threads. And then another one where the person was just so interesting that it was just amazing, but then they did monopolize the conversation for the entire table. But it was hilarious to listen to. So, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, what do you do when you're either with the person who's just controlling all of the narrative, and you could tell the other people were wanting to get in on it, but they couldn't, or the person that you're just going, oh no, here we go again. I sat down at the wrong end of the table.
We'll be right back.
If there was one skill that could double your income, advance your career, and increase your ability to influence, it is the skill of presenting. Whether it's on stage, in the boardroom, or at a job interview, the 30-Minute Presenter program will help take you to the next level. So check out our Instagram page, click the link in the bio, and get started on the 30-Minute Presenter program.
So I think if you're the host, so if it's your dinner party, then you have an obligation to direct traffic. That's part of, remember we're talking about how do you be interesting, be interested. Part of your host role is to be able to flick the attention and the focus. So when the engaging person finishes their story, the opportunity that you have to throw to others, we go, oh, Ash, that's so funny. Even though I'm hearing this for the 100th time, I still like it. It's amazing. But that reminds me, John, I know you used to go boating, didn't you? And you throw like that and you give John, a chance and you give them an opportunity like that. And if you are drawing if you're in the opposite situation where you sit next to someone and you can't bring anything out of them, it's about the type of question that you ask. So I know we had an incident in our incident. I shouldn't call it an incident. It wasn't like a accident or I'd have to report it to the police. But I had another boyfriend. Wow, boyfriend stories today. Maybe it's that time of year. And he came home to my place in Auckland. We were at university in Dunedin. And my brother lived at home with my mum and dad. And my brother's really good at being interested in other people. And what he said, so, Byron, do you play a bit of squash? And the other guy goes, no. And my brother goes, what about a bit of badminton? No. And my brother was like going to go through a list of sports. Yeah. He knew the guy was sporty, so he's trying to get something going, right? The trick is in the quality of your question is to have a really good deck of open questions that you do. So outside of work, what do you do with your time? Rather than, do you play a bit of sport? No. Do you have any hobbies? No. You want to ask questions that open up the possibility for answers.
And you actually hear people do this more than you think you do when you switch on your awareness for it. Like even if you listen to a radio interview and they're not very good at interviewing, the way they will interview is they'll ask questions and it'll be something like, so what did you do at the weekend? Did you go to the beach or did you go for a drive in your car? Like they're kind of trying to be helpful by offering answers. But by doing that, it feels weird when the person goes, no, actually, I went out and killed a seal or whatever they did in the weekend. So it makes the conversation non-congruent. Or the person picks up on something that you've said, but doesn't have any substance to it because it's not really what they did. So, I went to the beach. And then the person having the conversation goes, so did you, sit on the sand or did you go for a swim? Yeah. For a swim, like it just ends up with this really weird little zigzag, as opposed to what you're talking about with is maybe those more interesting open-ended questions where it gets the person to start talking. And one of the questions that you can use if you have found yourself going, "Did you go for a swim?" and they go, "Yes, I went for a swim," then you could say, "Well, tell me more about that."
Yes, so that's having those sentence starters, isn't it? Tell me more about that. How, what, why, where.
Yeah.
Not did you.
Yeah, did you? Was that warm? Yes. Oh, damn it. And then you stupid question.
You go,
did you get wet? Damn it.
No, what? I practiced this in the car before the party.
You never learn. What about if you do have a great story and maybe it's something that you could learn to tell and tell well? So I think probably one of the most useful stories is actually your story, a little bit about you, because a lot of people want to get to know you if you're a stranger. It's the first time that they've got to have a conversation with you. So how could you tell your story in a way that's maybe relevant to the environment that you're in? And then get them to tell their story. Like, I think both of those things are skills. And this can be in a social setting, but it can also be like in an interview situation. I've done so many interviews where you go, tell me a little bit about yourself. And the person either can't tell you anything or they just tell you their entire life story. What I love is when the person can tell you their story in a way that is relevant for the job that they're applying for. It's probably the same story they've told hundreds of times, but they've just drawn little different threads out that suddenly ties it together. And that is really interesting.
This one time, I was born. How about you?
Was it a vaginal birth?
Oh. So, as you say that, it gives me hives, right? And I try and think, why is that? And I think what I resist against is this idea of being calculated about it. But what I reckon is the reason I feel like it's calculated is that I don't find putting these stories together hard.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's not something, I think about the things that I do find hard and I absolutely prepare for them in advance.
Yeah.
And I do research and I go, how do I get good at this? So I think what you're talking about, if you don't find this easy, it is absolutely a great thing to do to prepare your story. And what I love about the interview analogy that you're giving is such a useful skill for an interview. But often when we're going into new social settings, that's like an interview as well. So if we do prepare, I think that's really useful advice. And even though I go, oh yes, but I can tell a story, I can think of 100 times that I've told the wrong story the wrong way. It's gone terribly. And if I'd actually just thought about it beforehand, I'd have been better off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but when is the point where you shouldn't prepare? Like, when should you just be more organic, and how do you do that on the spot?
Well, I think once you've got that connection with somebody, that's when all that organic, lovely stuff happens. What we're talking about is how can you get to know a person or get a person want to get to know you in an interesting way. And I think that preparation is really useful.
Yeah.
So useful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that would be, like, I would find the most awkward is a speed date situation. Now, luckily, I don't have to go through that. But in those speed date situations where you might have 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and you're just having either the same conversation or both people are trying to get to know each other, like that's scary. Like, I reckon that is really hard. I don't know how people do that stuff.
Yeah. If you come back to your question about the preparation of that story, like how do you tell when someone says, oh, so nice to meet you. And there's that pause for them to, you can talk about something that's topical, but when it comes to tell me a bit about yourself, pulling out the bits that are interesting, what we love culturally is we always love a bit of self-deprecation, but not in a way that actually puts ourselves down. That's challenging, right? How do I make a little bit of fun of myself, but I might say, for example, I started out as a lawyer, but I was not very good at it. I lasted 6 months and then I had to find something else to do. As an example, if that was going to be relevant in the situation. Yeah. In an interview, I'm going to talk about all the skills that I've learnt from the study and then talk about why it wasn't useful for me. I mean, what do you do? Because, I mean, you're much better at this stuff than I am in terms of the meeting new people, talking about yourself.
I don't think I am, though, Sash. I really struggle with this, and I probably default to stuff I've said before. I'll get the person talking more about themselves than I'm talking about me, pull on threads, just that's kind of all I've got, really. So I'm either going to entertain the room and take over, or I'm going to try to get the other person talking as much as possible and make them feel important, and try to draw out of information that they think back on that conversation and go, man, that was a really good conversation, mainly because they probably did the majority of the talking.
So what you're left with is prepare some good stories that you can tell and that can liven up a situation that are relevant to the event that you're at and the situation. You've got ask really good questions of other people. So be interested in them. That sounds fascinating. And I mean, one of the things, not everybody has this, is we have such short attention spans these days that we think, oh, well, that person just said they're a truck driver, so I can just assume everything there is to know about them. Versus the follow-up questions, how do you get into that? What do you enjoy about it? You must have seen some things on the road. What are the crazy... The more that you can be investigative or interested and curious in your questioning of them, the more you'll find out the most amazing things. And I think we're a bit quick to judge. And that might be why we don't take conversations further, because we box people up and go, boring, when that might not actually be true.
And I think to your point before, like, everyone is interesting and everybody has something interesting about them, but they either don't tell it right or they don't talk about it. Like... my granddad owning a circus is a really interesting fact, but it doesn't come out very often at dinner parties. But every now and then it might, if someone asks me the right question. So it all depends on the situation. But then your ability to tell that story in an interesting way, to your point previously, otherwise you just end up with the person that's going, well, how did you do the tires? Yeah. So there is a little bit of, I want to practice the art of telling great stories, but I don't want to be so rehearsed and so calculated about it that you can just tell I've told the story 100 times before and I'm just telling the story to fill the room.
Yeah, and the spontaneity comes when other people take part in that, because it's an interaction, not a performance. So I know sometimes when we have that performer in us, and this has happened to me, I'll be starting to tell one of my stories. Someone else will interrupt and go, "Oh, I used to live in a bus as well." And there's a bit of me that's like, it's an ugly part of me, but there's an ugly part that goes, "Yep, okay, well, you can have a turn later, but I started the bus conversation, so I'm going to finish the bus conversation, right? You didn't mention it. You're mentioning it now. Okay, good for you." Right, that's an ugly bit of me because I can just see the flaw. I can just go, because actually I know my bus story. Why not be interested in their bus story?
Yeah.
And so it's okay if someone else tops you, cuts in, and it changes what it is that you're talking about. A thought just popped into my head now. One of the things that's happened to me as a parent of teenagers, and I don't know if it probably wouldn't have happened to you. Maybe not. And let's not shame our children on the podcast. But as they go through their teenage years, you'll be in situations where adults will talk to them and the kids just kind of shut down a bit. And I'll be like, come on, you know better than to answer with just yes, no, or and it's almost like when we've come home from those situations, I've said, hey guys, we've talked about that. I don't know, I think it's useful to practice with your kids, and as they go through their teenage years, how do you have conversations? When one of my friends says to you, so how's it going at school? A really useful thing to say is, oh, good or bad, and then explain, not just the one word answer that doesn't grow the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Emma, my youngest, has got a friend called Olive. Let's call it Olive because that's her name.
Hi, Olive. Whatever's going to happen next, we love you.
And she's literally my favourite of all Emma's friends. And
there we go.
Emma's
Yay!
friends that listen to this podcast, you'll just have to work harder. And it's because she can have a conversation with adults. Like, she comes over and I'll go, hey, Olive, how was your day? And she goes, I've had a great day. Ash, how was your day? Like, she's literally just engaging backwards and forwards in the conversation. Her parents have done an amazing job at instilling that in her, or whether it's just one of those traits that she has just developed. But it is so much easier to talk to someone that has some social skills in the area of communication than someone that doesn't.
100%, and we can help our kids and help our spouses and help each other by being more deliberate. Listen to me. I'm turning into you. Being more deliberate, being more calculated, doing the preparation, practicing the story in the car.
Okay, so we've really been talking about, if we really boil it down to be the most interesting person in the room, it's probably about a little bit of practice. It's probably about a willingness to be interested in other people, and then really just starting to hone the craft of telling great stories, but not controlling the entire environment. Can you be inclusive in your stories? Can you host a room? Can you bring other people in? Can you pull on threads? Can you get other people to tell their stories in an interesting way, or tell stories they've never told before that will really be interesting to what they bring to the room and to the conversation?
I've just started thinking about crazy questions, and I would love to hear the crazy questions. I was thinking, you could tell a story about your pet cat and then say, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you involving an animal? Like, there's so much scope, right? There's so much scope just with a bit of preparation to really make your dinner parties, if you're having them, rock. Get ready for your interviews. What Ish is talking about from employing people, so relevant. Get good at telling your story. Break down the good bits. Make it fun. Bring it to life. Yay! Better conversations, everyone.
So, you been to movies lately, Sasha?
Yes, it's holiday season, so I've been to a couple of movies.
Oh, cool. What movies have you seen?
So I went to House of Gucci.
Ah, was it good?
And I did not know what to expect. Lady Gaga in the lead, Adam Driver. I just kind of sat there and watched and learnt so much. I did not know about the history of Gucci. Amazing.
Wow.
I did not know the movie was going to be 3 hours long. Amazing. Didn't notice. Time just flew by. I mean, it's a drama. It's not, you're in it for the story. There's no action. I don't think I'm giving too much away when I say there is a shooting and people die.
Wow.
What, and you?
Okay.
Let's role model conversation.
Okay.
That was my experience of the House of Gucci-ish. What about you? What have you been doing with your time?
I went and saw Ghostbusters. The new
Okay,
one.
yeah, I want to know about that.
Yeah, it was excellent. I think if you go in there and you just want to be entertained by a great movie, it's a great movie. If you go in there thinking it's going to be everything you wanted from the 80s, it's not that movie. But it was excellent. I love the actors. I love the way they did it. I think they did a really great job at tying the old movie into the new movie and making it relevant. So, yeah, I really did enjoy that. I thought it was pretty damn cool.
Yay, I'm looking forward to seeing one that's called The French Connection. It's got everybody who's everybody in it. It's a bit art house. I'll probably go on my own, but stand by for that scintillating movie review when it comes. And
Is that a remake? Is it a remake? No?
Maybe it's not called... The French Connection's an old movie, so maybe this one's not even called that. It might be called something completely different. Might be called The French Collection.
The French
I'll find out. But you started the show with a confession, and I have a confession to end.
Oh, okay.
I gave you shit about Red Notice. Remember that? The Ryan Reynolds movie? Because I watched it, but it was so stupid. But it was fun, right? So the other night we're sitting down and we're looking at what's available to watch, and Chris hadn't seen Red Notice, and I said, oh, you should watch this, babe. It's quite good. And I found myself really talking it up. And I watched it again and loved it all over again. So that'll teach me for being like a film snob, because I love Ryan Reynolds.